What a day for XRP now, wasn't it? Look, there's a story making the rounds right now, and the one you actually sit with the numbers that are behind it, you'll understand why I think this deserves a lot more attention than it's actually getting. And it centers around the DTCC. That's right. Now, as you know, this is the organization that's sitting underneath almost every trade that clears in US markets. And reports put their daily transaction volume somewhere around $114 trillion. Not billion, trillion, every single day. And now the DTCC, they've been very vocal about moving towards a tokenized settlement model, leaning on distributed ledger. That's how they're gonna get there. But here's where it gets interesting. Because Ripple's prime brokerage arm, they've been named part of that conversation. And networks like the XRP Ledger, they have come up as part of those rails that are actually being explored alongside others, right? Stellar, Canton, Chainlink, all named. When an institution that's moving that kind of daily volume and they start talking about tokenization, that's not just something you brush off, especially when their pilot goes live and you do your digging, your research, and you don't see XRP or Ripple named everywhere. I want to remind you something before we push forward. This is a test environment. The DTCC has publicly said multiple crypto companies, blockchains, rails, assets are going to be used. We're not talking about settlement yet. We're not talking about live production yet. Ripple didn't get invited to the DTCC's working group just to say that they're sitting on a board, folks. They were invited there for a reason. We all know how this story ends. Now, look, before I even go even further into this, I need to address a theory that I keep seeing get repeated with people who have total confidence, right? 100% this is going to happen, that it's already a settled fact. The idea that Ripple is quietly dumping XRP and they're going to settle through their own stablecoin RLUSD. That's what's going around right now. There's always something in the XRP community. There's always something, some kind of narrative. I've been here 10 years. It seems like every 3 months it's a new narrative that gets pushed about. The latest one, Ripple's getting rid of XRP, everything will run through RLUSD. And guess what? That just won't work. It won't work. So let's talk about this though. I want to run the numbers on this because the math, it makes this fall apart almost immediately. If you're doing 114 trillion a day and you want to pass that value through a stablecoin, right? A stablecoin, RLUSD, on a one-to-one basis, well, you're going to need 114 trillion worth of that stablecoin in circulation now, aren't you? Just to cover a single day of inflows. That's not a small task. That's not an impossible, one of a kind at reasonable scale. Now think about it. What are stablecoins built to represent? A fixed dollar sitting in a reserve. They are not built to be the fast-moving bridge that's going to settle an enormous volume in seconds without needing a matching reserve behind every transaction. That's the entire point of a bridge asset like XRP. It doesn't need to equal the volume passing through it because value moves through it and it settles almost instantly. It doesn't have to sit there as a static dollar-backed reserve the way that stablecoins do. So when you see someone out there and they're telling you with total certainty that XRP gets replaced by RLUSD for settlement at this scale, I need you to understand that they are either not thinking through the math or they're just repeating something they heard without even checking. Now let me address something that comes up in my comments all the time, in my DMs, on my TikTok, you name it, all right? And I think this deserves a real answer instead of just keep ignoring it. Now people will say I've been holding XRP for X amount of years, fill it in. I'm so discouraged. I get that. But you know what? I got to push back on it pretty hard. I want you to actually just take a step back. Look at the XRP chart. I'm going to use my example because I've been here since 2017. XRP traded around 0.6 of a cent in early 2017 before a run that turned a modest position into something life-changing all within 12 months. Now, I wish I got in when it was 0.6 of a cent. I didn't. I got in around 17 cents, but I was still part of that run. 17 cents, call it $3.50. A massive gain you're not getting anywhere else outside of crypto. Let's just be honest about that. They tell you it takes 7 years in the stock market just to do a 2x. Now, XRP went from, say, 20 cents to 350 just for easy math. What's the math on that? 10. If it's a 10x at 20, it's 2. If it's a 20x at 20, it's 4. So it's around 15%, 15x, not 15%. 1500% gain. Are you kidding me? It's done it before. It's gonna do it again. Now, wherever the bottom may be, I've been talking about 90 cents to $1 for almost 9 months, 10 months. Maybe this is the bottom when we bounce, or maybe we get the full retrace, which would be next if that region gets broken. I don't want it to go back down to 50 to 60 cents. I'd rather sit around $1 because the usual moves, the average moves we have been seeing on XRP, if we take 2017 out of the equation, because that was a very unique year, right? Still Wild Wild West-ish. And we look at the previous moves, think about XRP went from 20 cents in 2020 to $2, so that was a 10x. XRP then went from about 50 cents to a little over 350. We got about it, what, 7, 8x out of that? Maybe 9.5, 8.54. Yeah, 7, 8x. So we're averaging in between a 7 and 10x. Okay, let's just crank that down just a notch here. Let's say 6 to 9x. If XRP stays in that dollar region and we see the same move that we've seen in the past, $6 to $9. And that's not based upon any of the infrastructure usage, ETFs. That's just based upon what it's done in the past without any use case, right? 2017, no use case. 2020, no use case. I mean, you can see the last run, we had a little bit of a use case, right? We had a tiny bit of ETFs at the time before it made its second move. Think about that, though. It's going to do it again. And when you start to factor in utility, when you start to factor in more ETFs, bigger names, supply being absorbed, if the DTCC thing is live, what's going on over in the UK, EU, Asia, the utility is going to dwarf the move. So it can happen again. I don't want to say it can, that's not the right word. It will happen again. Now, I want to get over to this one. Someone left a comment on my channel a little while back that I still think about sometimes because this is the perfect example of how people misjudge these numbers. Now, he said if XRP hit $100, okay, that would mean XRP is worth more money that exists in the entire world. Now, I told him to go back and check the math on that one. I don't think he ever did because I never saw one of his comments come back through. I want you just to take the full supply of XRP, the full 100 billion, okay? Not just what's circulating, the entire supply, and multiply it by $100. You need a $10 trillion market cap. Now, $10 trillion, it sounds like a very big number. I get it. But put it against other things that are out there. Global real estate. What is that valued at? 360 trillion? How about the DTCC? They do quadrillions every year. $10 trillion is just a rounding error compared to other markets. It is not impossible. It can happen, especially if you believe, like me, crypto is going 20, 30, 40, 50 trillion at some point. Once the Clarity Act gets passed, we have already been told from the institutions that there is a tsunami of money sitting on the sidelines. How much money do you think BlackRock, State Street, BNY, the big three, are going to bring into crypto? You really think Bitcoin is the only asset that can have an over $2 trillion market cap? You really think that? I don't think so. Now, if my math is right, I believe XRP, or to have a $1 trillion market cap, we would be somewhere within the $15 to $20 range. You don't think that's going to happen either, do you? It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Now, here's a piece of news. I want to make sure you actually saw it this week because I know a lot of people got distracted with the DTCC. A major banking conglomerate reportedly filed a disclosure with the SEC, that's right, showing roughly $71 million in exposure to an XRP exchange-traded fund. $71 million. Now, when you see it on your screen, I got all the points out there for you. A filing like that does not come with a press release that's explaining their thinking behind it. Institutions disclose positions. They don't typically explain their internal reasoning to retail investors afterward. Why would they? They don't have to. They don't answer to us, to you, right? But think about what it does tell you, okay? You have a serious, regulated financial institution that actually went through the due diligence and they decided that exposure was worth taking on and disclosing publicly. That's a real signal, folks. Now, whether or not they say another word about it doesn't really matter. We just know the filing is there, and we've seen a lot of interesting ETF filings this week. I'll have to make a video on it. I think there was like 4 or 5 new companies that took exposure to XRP ETFs, which is huge. Now, we'll talk about 3 events that are lining up right now. First, we got reports that are circulating that this year claim your autonomous AI systems, they've done over 1 million transactions on the XRP ledger. That's without a human directing each one. They're choosing their network on its own, and they're choosing their XRP ledger, of course, because of speed and cost efficiency. I believe it's at like 1.2 now million transactions. Massive. Number 2, your Atlantic Council, central bank's digital currency tracker. They track your global economic developments generally, and their tracker shows that central bank digital currency projects are close deviations of them. Well, they're starting to come to life. All the way from your small economies all the way up. Now, I told you central bank digital currency, it's kind of a word a lot of people want to avoid, but I do believe CBDCs are going to be actual stable coins. I think that's where we're taking them. And now number 3, just follow the capital. Between ETF disclosures we just covered, through your corporate treasury purchases and your other institutional filings, real money, it just keeps quietly moving into this space. All while your public sentiment is at one of its lowest points ever. You know why? Because institutions, they buy the fear. And they're only buying the fear because they understand where these markets are going, folks. Now let's talk about the price, because I know a lot of you clicked on this video because of the price. And I want to be straight about what these numbers actually mean instead of just throwing some big figure on the screen to get you to click. Now, there's been several people that I follow, whether it's on Twitter, YouTube, just throughout the space. They floated levels in the range of $7 to $8 in the near term, with some pointing towards that 10 to 12 figure as a further target. Now, this is technical opinion based on chart structure. As we know, charts break all the time. It's one view among many, not a guarantee, of course. And I want to be honest about that, because nobody, including me, can promise you how this plays out. Now, a chart's a chart until it's not a chart. Our chart has no idea what's going to happen 6 months from now. It takes one event like that to send something absolutely flying to the moon. And then what happens? The chart gets broken and it comes back and they say, we need to adjust the targets. All right, no shit, because your chart doesn't work, right? Utility works. Utility is the driver here. Now, the $100 conversation, $1,000 conversation, that is on a much longer horizon. That is not happening by the end of this year. Sorry to tell you that. It's just not going to happen. A double-digit XRP, that's in the books, folks. You need to follow the utility. And the thing that is crazy about all this, we're dealing with banks and governments. They don't just wake up and flip a switch. This is a very lengthy, and the process just keeps on dragging out. But if you're here for the long run, and who knows what the long run is, how many years it is, I never thought it would be a decade, but hey, here we are. Still got a smile on my face. Then what do you, just sit back and relax. Sit back and relax. And here you go. My final screen. The words of wisdom. I think that's a great segment for this. Build your own conviction and don't get shaken out. Look, if you think XRP is going to $100, don't let someone try to tell you it's not. If that is your opinion, your research, you looked into it, you ran the numbers, don't let someone try to convince you that your opinion and your research is wrong. Because guess what? They don't know either. No one knows. We don't know what next week is going to look like. We don't know what next year is going to look like. We could see everything gets moved over to the XRP ledger, and next thing you know, 114 trillion is running through it every single day. We don't know what the future holds, but if your research tells you that the future is an XRP-based future, don't let someone talk you out of that. That's the craziest thing I ever heard. Stick to your plan, stick to your guns. You know what you hold at the end of the day. Nobody else knows. Hey, hit that like, subscribe. I'll see all y'all on the next one.